Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the 21st installment of the Johns Hopkins Foreign Affairs Symposium. My name is Julianne Pack, and along with my co-executive directors, Alia Doctor and Catherine Gross, we are proud to present the fourth speaker in our 2018 series, Ravel Unravel. Founded in 1997, the Foreign Affairs Symposium has strived to encourage discussion and debate on topics of international significance by bringing global leaders to Johns Hopkins Homewood campus. Our mission is to provide a forum for Hopkins students and faculty and members of the surrounding Baltimore community to engage with the most pressing issues of our time. This year, we celebrate the theme of Ravel Unravel. It is both a reflection and a challenge to the current political climate of social polarity. Our series comes at a time equally marked by processes of making and unmaking. We are witnessing the disintegration of norms, civil rights, and institutions, as well as the creation of new movements and communities. One of the most difficult challenges we face today is to grapple with the fear that pervade our everyday lives and engage in dialogue and nurturing that. All of our speakers have confronted the challenges presented by this critical juncture in time, whether it be through their academic engagement, political activism, or community service.
Tonight, we engage with the issues of LGBTQ rights, government transparency, and technology with Chelsea Manning and DeRay McKesson. On the 24th of April, we will welcome 2017 MacArthur Fellow Greg Asbed and Laura Germino, both Johns Hopkins SAIS alums and co-founders of the Coalition of Immacaulay Workers. Our events would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. We thank the Office of Women and Gender Resources and LGBTQ Life for collaborating with us tonight. Many thanks also to the Office of Student Life, the Parents Fund, and the President's Office. In addition, we want to give special shout-outs to Kirsten Frick, Donnelly Mahabir and Demery Woolway, Caitlin Toomey, Jackie Morton, and countless others who give us their advice and time on a daily basis. Also, just so you're all aware, for the purposes of safety, there are 4 emergency exits behind you. In case of an emergency, very unlikely, walk, do not run to the exits.
Chelsea Manning is a technologist and network security expert who worked as an intelligence analyst for the Department of Defense, where she disclosed classified documents revealing human rights abuses and corruption connected to the US wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Upon being sentenced to 35 years for leaking government documents, an unprecedented amount of time for whistleblowers, she publicly identified as a trans woman and asserted her legal rights to medical therapy. After serving 7 years in military prison, President Obama commuted her sentence to time served just 3 days before he left office. In addition to being a vocal advocate for transgender and queer rights and government transparency, Chelsea has also immersed herself in the fields of artificial intelligence and machine learning, exposing their social, technological, and economic ramifications and practical applications. Tonight, we also welcome Baltimorean DeRay McKesson as moderator. A former school administrator, DeRay is now a prominent civil rights activist who has been at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. In 2015, Fortune magazine named him one of the world's 50 greatest world leaders. DeRay is engaged with issues related to politics, culture, and social justice through both his political discourse and podcast, Pod Save the People. And now, without further ado, we are proud to introduce Chelsea Manning and DeRay McKesson.
Hello. We are excited to be here. I get the easy job of asking the questions because you came to hear from the expert, Chelsea, today. So there's a lot to cover. We're going to do, I'll be asking a lot of questions and we'll have questions from the crowd. And Chelsea, let's just start with, there are a lot of people who feel strongly about you. They either feel like you are, that's like understatement, they either feel like you're a hero, some people feel like you're a traitor. How do you think about that?
Well, I don't, first off. I just stick to being myself, because that's what I'm good at, apparently. So, I mean, you know, there's a lot, you know, and I think that it's some of these words, they set expectations about you, especially because, like I look at the word hero, for instance. You know, I spent the last, 7 years in prison, but then, you know, I finally get out, and I'm like, I have this like expectation of because I've been like there's this like cult of personality that develops around a person when they're not able to be out in the world, able to, you know, live among everyone else. So I kind of felt like this like symbol emerged that people argue over, but in the meantime, I'm now I'm out, and I'm just like, I haven't really figured stuff out myself, you know. Like I'm well read, and I've read a lot of books, sure, and I've been, you know, out in the world as a teenager, but I mean, as an adult, you know, I'm really, you know, like the apartment that I live in is literally the first apartment I've ever lived in by myself, you know. So it's, you know, I'm like, it doesn't, you know, these words that people argue over really don't have any meaning at the end of the day. Whenever you just look at me as a person, that, you know, I have to figure out how I'm going to pay rent, and I have to figure out what I'm going to have for breakfast, and I don't know, like words like hero or, you know, traitor or criminal or whatever, they just feel like words that somebody else uses.
Did you think that you were going to get caught?
I mean, you know, this isn't really a caught thing. It's more like a big thing. Like, you know, the objective is to do something, you know, and I didn't really come here to like talk about like what happened, and a lot of the information about what happened is still, you know, like non-public information for whatever reason, but you know, it was more about making this thing happen, you know, making getting the information out there, and I mean, it's not like you can hide that. So that wasn't really a part of the understanding of what it was. More like making something happen and dealing with the consequences later, but more importantly, making it happen now.
And for the people that don't know, can you explain what Obama did to your sentence? So people confusingly sort of talk about pardon or commutation. Like, what was the decision, and what does that mean for you moving forward?
Yeah, well, you know, the power itself is called the pardon power. So a commutation is a form of pardon, but it is, you know, a commutation is a different type than just a full pardon. So there's a full pardon, which everything goes away, but there's arguments about how true that is, which I won't get into because they're really long and drawn out and hypothetical. And then there's a commutation, which just alleviates a sentence, a portion of a sentence, so, or, you know, reduces something. So I had a 35-year sentence cut to 7 years, and that was about it. I still have a conviction on the record. Still happened. I'm still a convicted felon, which is interesting. But I've managed to navigate around that, I think.
And what's your necklace?
Oh, it's a hashtag.
Why?
I mean, it was a gift that I got because I guess you know, Twitter got me out of prison. So so yeah, because I didn't have any jewelry when I got out, and so a friend of mine was like, "Yeah, I'll make you something." Then they like handed it to me as a gift, and I'm like, "Oh, that's perfect." Like I thought, yeah, long story with that. Very personal.
We met. Our first conversations were on Twitter.
They were, yeah.
A long time ago when you were still.
I was surprised that I hadn't met you though, because like we were from the same club scenes. We went to the same clubs. Same. It was very. Yeah, we had a whole dinner. We had a whole lunch, and we're like, "Did you know so and so?" Yeah.
Yeah, it was like it's a small world fighting for justice out there.
Yeah. Now
that gets us talking about social media. What is your take on what's happening with Facebook right now? Do you think it is overblown? Do you think that Cambridge Analytica actually is a threat? Do you think that this is sort of a non-story, that people made a story?
Yeah, I've been saying this for years, you know, and you know, like this whole notion of like a scandal, you know, like I find it surprising because if you actually read their mission statement, they literally lay out what their objective was. You know, they didn't hide, you know, they did. It wasn't this deep. It was just like, it was just hidden away in one sense and not in another, because like the language that they were using is sort of obfuscated. And yeah, this is the problem. You know, the fact that large institutions, whether it be government, whether it be private sector, whether it be NGOs or whatever, like they have so much. You know, they're collecting all this data, and we're like handing it to them on a silver platter, you know, for free to do to live our lives. But you know, like this data it has value and it has use and you can do things with it. And even if you can't do certain things with it today, you'll be able to do things with it, 10 years from now that you couldn't before. And these tools haven't been just being used against people and being used to manipulate people now. Like, this isn't something that just happened out of nowhere. It's been happening since the beginning. It's just, it's first affected like the most vulnerable, populations and communities. So,
is there a way to fix Facebook?
We could break it apart.
Do you feel the same about Twitter?
I think that the centralization of these platforms is the biggest problem because that there's supranational corporate entities that kind of transcend even like national policy by being immersed in so many different countries on so many different platform variations. There's different Google policies for Europe because of court rulings. There's different ones for China because of aggressive censorship. So this sort of centralization of the platform and then the centralization of the information collected on the platform and the fact that these terms of use, we don't really read them. They change all the time. We're really just handing people a blank check. We're really handing an organization, a nameless, faceless organization, a blank check on huge amounts of information that may or may not be accurate, that may not be useful in one sense, but can still affect or change your entire life. And not just as an individual. Like I talk a lot about feedback loops, especially when I'm talking to technologists about the dangers of the software we're developing. If you go into Google and you like type in something and you type in a search, well, the search results that it brings up, are calculated based upon depending on your search history on how relevant it is to you. So it's skewed. You're getting skewed answers. And then because you searched it, you're also skewing that answer further. So if you do this several hundred iterations or several 100,000 iterations, you see that now you've bumped up the likelihood of some search result becoming more relevant than another, and so it becomes this sort of it becomes this tunnel vision where you see less and less information that pertains to what you want to see, and more of it, being like what you might click on more. So you see less things that you might disagree with more, except for the things that make you angry that you disagree with. So Twitter, in a sense, Twitter, Facebook, and Google, they're optimized to make us to expose us to things that we agree with and things that we strongly disagree with. So this sort of feedback loop is already drastically altering, our daily, our entire political society, And I would say that a lot of the political polarization stems from the fact that we sort of live in these information bubbles that we surround ourselves through our search results.
Now, the Russian bots have been a lot in the news. The diplomats have been removed from countries because of Russia. Do you think that the Russian interference is as big as it's being sort of played in the media? Do you think that
I think state interference, in social media platforms is pretty common. Russia certainly appears to be an innovator in this realm and a very significant investor. But they're doing it just more brazenly than other countries. Other countries are doing it more subtly. They're the United States even does a lot of these. We criticize them, but at the same time we also engage in very similar practices. It's just that it's not happening to Americans. Therefore, we kind of look the other way. So yeah, I would say that the use of social media, and actually I've been writing about this for a long time. The use of social media, because it's no longer governments initially sort of ignored social media, but then when they realized, oh, this is this is important and we can affect this environment, they the military starts seeing it as a new battle space. This is a new environment which we can wage our wars. We're waging wars of the mind now, which we can we don't have to fight with we can fight in the cyber so it's just this continuous growth of state intervention in social media that was totally expected, that was totally predictable, and that is getting, it's being viewed through a political lens, but it's a systemic problem that's been there the whole time, and everybody's doing it.
Is Russia more of a threat to the United States than another country, or sort of similar?
I would say that we're all a threat to ourselves simultaneously, like in the bigger scheme of things. It's less about it's this country versus this country versus this country, because everybody's doing the same things in different ways.
Okay.
So and that is having the people who are getting the most impacted by that are not coincidentally the most vulnerable communities of all the different countries. So it's just becoming this continuous ramp up in aggression, this ramp up of political tension that really is algorithmically driven. I would say if you fundamentally look at what's going on, it's like these are like the rhetoric that you hear is just something that you're seeing because an algorithm is putting it in front of you.
Now, I'll ask you about a few agencies that you might have had experience with. One would be the FBI. So Comey and McCabe both seem to have been fired because of the Mueller investigation. What do you make of what's happening at the FBI right now?
Well, the FBI is corrupt, so that's the whole thing. It's not just. It's this focus on individual actions. Not to say that I'm not going to defend McCabe. I'm not going to defend I'm not going to defend Mueller either. I'm also going since he was the FBI director under my case, but
no big deal. No big deal.
Yeah. So I think there's this and I'm not I'm not going to defend. I'm just not going to defend the FBI here, like whether it's Comey or whoever. Like, it's just a really why are we depending on a federal law enforcement agency that has constantly and consistently intervened in American politics again and again and again over the entire history, over the entire 75-year, I think 80-year history now, and it's been constantly getting, it's constantly been doing stuff, and now we're expecting it to solve our problems. It's like, no, it was like the start of political intervention by foreign or by intelligence agencies started with the FBI. It started with the FBI. After the First World War. So I'm very hesitant to put any stake in the FBI to be able to clean its own house, let alone everyone else's.
And what about the woman who is slated to be appointed to the CIA director?
Yeah, well, I have strong opinions there, but I'm surprised to even hear her name publicly. But there you go. I guess that's what happens when you're in the intel field. Eventually, they become public figures. Yeah, I think. These people did torture. It was so much so that they had to cover it up. And they knew it at the time. They knew they were crossing. They knew they were stepping over lines. So they covered it up. And they tried to write documents to try to make it seem like it was more humane than it actually turned out to be. And they managed to get around a Senate investigation. They actually prevented a large repository of documents from making it to the Senate. The Senate found this out. A Department of Justice investigation went and then was ended in because of a statute of limitations issue, which is in my own opinion questionable in how this happened. So there's been this constant confluence of events that leads to these people who knowingly engaged in something that is legally defined as torture, without any ambiguity about that. And just because of this confluence of events, whether it's the John Woo, whether it's the John Woo memo or the DOJ investigation ending under the Obama administration, or just everybody keeps wanting to look the other way, and that's how they got away with it. And now they're being held up as figures who are now in power, and we should have dealt with them sooner, And I think that's the one from the intelligence community. I mean, from my own experience being in the intelligence community perspective, the fact that we look the other way has now been a tacit condonement of this kind of behavior, and is going, I can imagine and expect that this will only happen again, and
The last person I ask about is John Bolton, who has said some pretty inflammatory things about you.
Yeah.
He's now the national security, or
Yeah.
soon to be national security advisor.
He might have called for my death.
He did. Any thoughts about him?
I'm still alive, just so he knows.
What do you think it matters that he'll be the national security advisor? Will it have an impact on, or what's your prognosis of what that might mean?
Well, I mean, I might, I actually don't know what to say, because I might actually be in a position to say something about it. He's a very problematic individual, to say the least. I mean, he was the UN ambassador under the Bush administration. Need I say more? He's been a neoconservative. I mean, he's a staunch neoconservative. And every single time that he's in an office, we go to war. It's been every single time that he's in a position of power, we end up in a war. So I see that connection, and I realize, oh, okay, he is one of the people who you bring in whenever you want to do something. So that's my primary concern about him, is that he's not just hawkish, but he's the kind of individual who seems to lay the groundwork for these kinds of things to actually happen.
Now, you're running for Senate.
I am. I can't really talk about it, but.
And if you just can't talk about it right here for this event, but we can talk about it in general in some ways. If you win, do you think that your stance on these agencies might change because you'll be a senator? How do you think that would influence the way you thought about the CIA or the FBI or?
I mean, no. I mean, that's kind of the point, isn't it? I mean, oh yeah, now I'm in now. I'm gonna be supportive. No, that's not gonna. I mean, yeah, they do 75 to 80% of budget reauthorization bills don't get argued on. They don't get looked at. They just get signed, and everybody votes on them almost unanimously. And that's how these gigantic programs that we find out 20 years later, horrified that it happened. But it's because nobody's reading it, or they're looking the other way, or they're worried about their lobbyists. And I want to put a spot. If I'm ever placed in a position where I could put a spotlight on all these consistently reauthorized programs that lead to gigantic ICE detention systems, and that lead to growing prison system, that lead to a ramp up in the criminal justice system. All these things happen in these quiet bills that don't get talked about until a horrible thing happens. And oh well, we couldn't do anything about it, but we could do something about it every single time. And I would love to be in a position where I could be the one to say we can do something about it right now, right here, and just say no.
Did you have any indication from the Obama administration that you were going to get out? Did you think it was coming? Did you know it was going to happen?
I mean, some of this I'm saving for the book. So, but yeah, we didn't have anything until we did. And it was sort of a shot in the dark. That said, I still didn't, even if we could see where the winds were going, so to speak, I didn't believe it. I couldn't comprehend it. It wasn't, whenever you go to prison with a 35-year sentence, and you've already been in prison for 3.5 years, like I had been, I mean, the notion of a miracle or something incredible happening or something like that goes away. You just accept the fact that you're going to be there probably for the rest of your, known adult life, the adult life that you can comprehend, I think I was 25 when that when that happened. And yeah, so like I just didn't think I was going to get out, and I was not okay with that, but it was something that I understood and that I comprehended. So having that acceptance be challenged in any way was really hard. It was really tough, and I didn't want to believe it, and especially because there had been a very profound change in administrations and in positions, and I was still going to be in prison for 117 of those extra days that I had to, of the 120 days that I still had to serve, and I thought something was going to happen, and I was never going to get out. So I mean, I'm out now, but like I didn't think, but yeah, it was very difficult to comprehend an actual miracle happening, so to speak.
And how has the transition out been, given that you didn't think you'd get out? Has it been harder than you thought it'd be, or like?
It's been much harder than I thought it would be. I'm not used to living by myself. I'm not used. I mean, I've had moments where I will wake up in the middle of the night, and I'll want to beat on the wall and just yell at somebody and be like, "Hey, what are you up to?" But you can't do that in real life. It's kind of a prison thing. So there's been, there's and somebody actually told me, a friend of mine actually told me, like, your apartment looks markedly like a prison cell, and I'm like, wow, like I wasn't thinking of that. I got so used to arranging things a certain way that my apartment starts to emulate the same things. Little things like that, have made me realize just how deeply ingrained, this experience has been, and how hard it's going to be for me to like really get over a lot of this and really get back, into life. It has, I've been able to function, it's not like it's been crippling or anything, but there's definitely moments where I'm like, wow, like I really need to take some time and figure this out. I think one of the moments that had me the most surprised recently was I was like in my bathroom, and I just sat there, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't move because I had forgot that I could just walk out. Like it was like early in the morning, but like I didn't have to wait for somebody to like escort me or lead me out or anything. So on my own accord, it was hard for me to remember that I don't have to wait for someone. It was like a tick or like a muscle memory like kind of thing where I just got so used to something, and even though I have been out for like 10 months, I still like had this like moment where, oh, okay, like I can open this door by myself, And it was just like, wow, like, like that doesn't happen very often, of course, but it just, like 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't know. It was just very strange.
How has that influenced the way that you think about prison reform?
I mean, there's nothing good that comes out of prisons. Nothing. I mean, I don't see any purpose to them or point to them. The people don't need to be in prisons. They're not. There's nothing good that happens inside of them. Nothing. I mean, you could try to say that it's about reform or like reforming an individual, rehabilitation, but it is purely about power, and it's purely about keeping a class of individual from society on a bigger scale. Like that's what it boils down to, is like trying to remove people from society. And it's usually for, crimes are written by powerful people. Like criminal justice system is created by a powerful class of people who determine what is or is not criminal. Once you realize that and you look at the laws that actually get written and why they would get written, it becomes clear what the intent of creating this system is. In a particular time in history, it might be this group of people or this group of people, but the laws are always about going, and I'm talking like internationally, not just in America, but like around the world, we look at laws and we say, wow, they're going, like these are about political suppression, and it's, but like and I actually talked to, I was actually talking to Nadia from Pussy Riot, of Pussy Riot fame, I guess. But we both have prison experience, and we both spent time in prison, and she and I started to share stories in the green room at Day for Night, and then again recently at South by Southwest, and we're always struck by our conversations because we just share like these silly prison stories that we understand because we had the same experience. People talk about like her time in prison and as in Russia, but they don't realize that the things that happened to her were almost identical to the things that I experienced, and we like shared stories, and it was just funny the stories that we're able to share with each other because it's only like there's like this prisoner solidarity that we had that transcended all of the cultural, national, linguistic boundaries. It just, prisons are the same and they suck everywhere and they need to go.
In your work originally when you were inside the system was around Iraq and Afghanistan.
Correct. Well, I mean, there was some Department of Homeland Security stuff, so there was, I mean, it wasn't all foreign.
What do you make of what's happening there now?
I mean, it's been forgotten about, that's for sure. We like go to a place, be there for a while, and then if we happen to still have stuff there, we stay, and then we forget about it. I mean, that's pretty much what happens. We got out of Iraq only to start to crawl back in. And largely because of a result of the fact that we were there in the first place, we had to come back. So it's like this never-ending cycle of like we broke it, so we left because we broke it, and because we broke it, we're coming back. It's really. I mean, it makes you wonder about and unfortunately, I think that foreign policy for a nation like the U.S. Or any nation really that has a republic, democratic spiel about it, has a tendency to engage in a certain foreign policy direction and then flip and then switch wildly and then flip the other direction. And in the meantime, the debate is so fast here. We talk about one thing and then we move on to the next. So, but our foreign policy and our interventions have been going on for almost a century now, on a large scale. I mean, small scale, obviously, and obviously we kind of like had this like constant incursion throughout the 19th century through Native American and indigenous lands, but like we have, whenever it comes to our foreign policy, we just keep expanding. We have the largest military in the world, the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, and as a reminder, the largest, prison system in the world. But these institutions are always asking for more. They're always asking for more stuff, more money, more powers. And it's not, even if it's the largest in the world, it's always more. And like that's because it just keeps getting bigger, and we keep expecting it to get bigger, and we should stop that. I mean, and we should have stopped that before we went to Iraq. We should have stopped that before we went to Afghanistan. But we just keep doing it, and there's always the next place. There's always the next thing. We're always going to need more. We're always going to need more.
What do you say to the people, though, who say that those apparatus are what keep us safe, right? That like they are protecting us against these
bullshit. I mean, that's literally these don't keep anyone safe. And if anything, it causes an enormous amount of domestic harm in the long run, because what we do is we go into a foreign country often, learn about like all these great tools and techniques and weapons that we can use in an occupied country, come back, and then we're like, oh, gee, we have all these weapons. Like, what should we do with them? All right, let's give them to, cops, So it's this sort of boomerang effect where we bring, where we engage, in Iraq or Afghanistan, but then whenever resources start coming back, all this knowledge about, like this counterinsurgency mindset, like law enforcement now has this, we need to occupy, it's a domestic military occupation that police forces are engaged in the most vulnerable communities. Again, I see this in Brooklyn, I see this in Baltimore, I see this in Oakland, I see this, in San Francisco. I've seen this. I've even seen this in places like Houston. It's like this. We just have this like mindset that we need to bring as many like hardcore weapons and equipment and knowledge to like go into a neighborhood and just harass people and just be there and presence. We've taken a lot of these like counterinsurgency and occupation methods. I mean, I look at a lot of police now like will drive around a neighborhood with their lights on, just flashing, right? I went and I found out where this came from. There was the Israeli Defense Force from the like occupation of Palestine. They like developed, we're importing this technique from an occupied, from an occupier in an occupied country, and then importing it here as like a law enforcement technique, but it was actually a military, intimidation technique. These are the kinds of things that we keep bringing back home.
What do you think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
It's been going on since, if you look at a map, I dare people to look at a map of Israel in 1945 and look at a supposed map of what it is today. And you see that like what's considered the Palestinian lands keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So, there's all this argument about settlements. Is the Israelis keep building settlements, and there's always arguments about settlements in Palestine. Because what they do, and they do this consistently, is that people will start moving into Palestine, and the Israeli Defense Force will provide them protection. They'll start building settlements, and then the settlements will get, protests because they're not supposed to be there. And then the Israeli Defense Force will be like, okay, we need to protect from the protesters. So they'll build a fence and they'll like they'll like increase their military presence. And then eventually it just gets to a point where the settlement just gets absorbed into the rest of Israel, and the border moves, because of some ceasefire or agreement where it just keeps getting bigger. So it's this like slow encroaching ethnic cleansing that's happening, but it's like happening slower than than average. So it's just like happening it's like a little bit more 5 years, a little bit more 10 years. And they, the Israeli Defense Force even has this idea about how it's done. It's this notion of mowing the grass, every 4 to 5 years. And we're seeing that again, where they boosted the Israeli Defense Force boosted its presence in certain areas, and then said, hey, you guys can open fire now. And then whenever protesters show up, and so they did, and obviously a bunch of people got shot, which is it flared up the thing again. But this is a deliberate tactic. They keep doing this. It's called, and they even have a name for it. They call it mowing the grass, and which we've adopted, in the military. So.
Wow. And what about Trump said that he's going to meet with the leader of North Korea soon? What are your thoughts on North Korea?
I don't know. I don't know how that conversation is going to go. I don't even want to guess.
How would you describe Trump's approach to foreign policy? If there is a coherent way to describe it.
I'm going to differ with a lot of people and say that it's consistent with what, seriously, he's been letting the agencies just do whatever they want. So a lot of the foreign policy that we've seen is a continuation of the last 50 years, actually without restraints from the administration. From that previous administrations have put more restraint on the institutions, on the Defense Department, on the Justice Department, on the State Department. It's kind of like the administration came in and was like, okay, you guys do whatever you want. So this is the inevitable result. The things that are happening are what the institutions have always wanted. They're what you expect the Department of State to do. I mean, and I do think that from a managerial perspective, I mean, we keep seeing cabinet officials keep moving, and I think it's very telling, because I think that the tactic here is to prevent a political figure from obtaining too much power in these departments, because they're not there long enough to really be entrenched, so they don't become like a part of it. So it's really become like the bureaucrats are have more say and more power than they've had in decades, I would say.
Ben Carson's staying though.
What's that?
Ben Carson.
I haven't really been paying attention.
He's frightening.
Yeah.
So we'll just move on. Most people are nostalgic about Obama.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the Obama administration? A lot of people are nostalgic. Some people are not so nostalgic.
I mean, yeah, I'm not so nostalgic, seeing that I spent 7 years of that in prison. But
he let you out.
He did let me out, but I mean, I was in there for 7 years. I mean, he didn't have to wait. That said, I'm very thankful. I mean, genuinely. I mean, I've been very thankful. I didn't expect it. I didn't think it was going to happen, and it did. And for that, I'm immensely grateful, and I can only thank. It chokes me up every time I think about it. That said, politically, I mean, not always in alignment, not always in agreement, but that's it. I can appreciate as a human being the fact that I mean, from my perspective, the safe decision was to not do it. So that I can only have the utmost respect for.
We're gonna get a question soon, and in a moment. Chelsea, I want to know, in this moment, there is sort of unprecedented levels of activism across the country that we're seeing. There are also people who feel like they have marched and protested and called and emailed and run for office, and like the outcomes haven't changed. What do you say to those people?
Direct action gets the goods. I mean, when systems can and do fail sometimes. This happens quite regularly. When they do, you can't ask them to stop failing. You can't ask a system to stop failing. You have to start doing things. You have to start doing things outside of the norm, outside of the process. I feel like I did something a lot like that. And we need to start making decisions as people and as communities about whether or not, we need to go further than simply, asking them to stop, being crappy. And I mean, that requires work. It requires commitment. It requires organization. It requires a lot more than chance and, science. And I hate to say it. It does require a lot of, and there's risk involved with any time you step outside the norms. Occupy Wall Street, there was risk involved. We saw, in Ferguson, there was risk involved, in pushing back and pushing the boundaries. And here in, with Freddie Gray, we see the same thing. When institutions fail, and they are failing now. And the sooner that we learn that, the better. And you might say, well, I mean, obviously, I'm involved in the electoral system, so but you can't expect a vote to change things. Like You can't. Nobody's going to go to the like if you go to the ballot box expecting change in 2018. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, we really need to start thinking further and thinking outside the box because, we can't wait anymore. We can't wait for change to magically happen. We need to start doing things.
Now, last two questions. One is, how do you think about safety? I think about myself as somebody, the FBI visited my house here. I got a death threat at the Charles Theater downtown, and they evacuated the movie theater. I got a lot of death threats over the past couple years, which are never exciting. How do you think about safety?
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to talk about my safety practices, but they're pretty high, and it's mostly mostly electronic and counter surveillance. So, I would say that it's less been about safety because I roll with posse. So, but it's been more about security in terms of like ensuring my privacy, ensuring that my communications with activists and organizers and people across the country are not being monitored or interfered upon. Yeah, it's been, like the whole country is, being sort of embroiled in this, and I worry more. I'm more worried about my safety in terms of like what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I mean, I don't, one of the reasons why I've ended up being so vocal and outspoken and outwardly as a public figure, even after I just got out of prison, is because I don't know how safe it's going to be the kind of person that I am 5 years from now. An outspoken, politically, controversial trans woman. I don't know how safe I feel. So, and that's just for me. And I imagine that that's the way millions of other people are feeling in their own different way, based on their own sense of the direction things are going. So.
And the last question for me is, how do you think about sort of these issues of identity that are rising to the public conversation right now, both about race, which seems to be sort of the axis that the Trump sort of conversation centers on, and these issues around sort of sexuality or identity. You as a trans woman, I'm a gay black man. Like, I think these conversations in some way have been more public than they've ever been, but they are still sort of tough. So how do you think about those two big buckets?
I just reminded people of this 2 days ago, actually, on my Twitter account. Visibility is not the same thing as equality. That's a very important thing, because just because you get seen doesn't mean that everybody's doing well. I remember the marriage equality movement and this like debate and discussion over whether it was just a lot of, there was a lot of push and a lot of effort in lobbying and expecting the court system to do this one thing, this one big incredible accomplishment and victory, to get this big thing. And then when it happened, as I feared and as I wrote about, but before and after the marriage equality ruling, the effort and energy kind of dissipated. And because some people got, the rich middle class, people got to get married, but for somebody like me, and I lived homeless in 2006. I lived on the streets of Chicago for 6 months. I mean, and I only got out of that situation because my aunt miraculously found me and took me into her apartment or into her house, and that's not available to everyone. I mean, what in that, if I'm in that situation today, what does marriage equality do for me? It doesn't do anything, So the queer, the queer community has to deal with more homelessness than most communities across the board, statistically. So, these are systemic problems that need to be addressed, and I think the focus on one issue or visibility or being even I mean, like, sure, I was in vogue, but that doesn't mean anything for the trans community in reality, you know, fundamentally, you know.
Vogue is cool though.
Yeah, it's cool, but it was fun. But I mean, that's all it was fun. I mean, it wasn't. I didn't think it was that. You know, it seems groundbreaking to others perhaps, but I actually felt like, you know, I was actually worried, you know, because I was like, am I, you know, am I just falling into this trap of visibility as a poet?
Yeah. I know that said it was the last question, but I told myself the next time we talked, I was going to ask you about the picture. There's that picture that you took that people are really frustrated by.
Oh, you're talking about the
Trump supporter. Or like,
well, yeah. So it was the yeah. So it was the escape room photo. But yeah, it was actually so what happened was it ran for about 3.5 months, and this was I managed to obtain a tie and a connection with because I actually had, through the support network that got me out of prison, one of the people that was a part of the Mike Cernovich alt-right, like alt-light as some of them get called on the far right. One of them was I knew through, and I was able to reach out to, and I thought, you know, because I was working with protest, because I was actually at the Milo protest in September of last year. I was protesting against their presence there in Berkeley, and I was working with a few other activists, and we decided to try to use that as like an in to see how far it went. And so I got closer and closer, and I started meeting. So, like, I started meeting some of these people, and I was just like, what, you know, like, I'm just learning so much, and you know, so I placed myself into this role, and I started using my privilege and my access to these people behind the scenes as a way of organizing against them. So I thought, but you know, in retrospect, after the, you know, like because I went and I did, there was a book that came out in January, Fire and Fury, and a lot of the information that I obtained in this process was sort of like in this book. So the value of that sort of diminished, and then there was a party that I went and I was going to go crash it, and I did crash it, and I did manage to get in there, but they had control of the environment, so they took all these photos of me and really sort of flipped the narrative on the head, and I got kind of, you know, caught up and like after it all, I'm like, that was really stupid. I really hurt a lot of people. You know, I fucking hate these people, and I can't stand them. Which was why I, you know, did this thing, you know, and I thought I was doing something productive, and I thought I was doing something helpful, but I was stupid, and you know, the other people that I was working with, you know, we all went, wow, we really didn't think this one through, and yeah, so I regret that. I regret that decision, you know, greatly, and I feel bad because I felt like let a lot of people down, but you know, my friends stood by my side, so. Yeah, so we've been able to move on, thankfully.
Thank you.
All right, great. Let's have a round of applause for this. So we're going to be taking questions now, and due to the time limit, maybe keep it to 3 questions. So there's a mic here and a mic on that end, and please keep your questions limited, no monologue. Thank you. There's also a reception that will be following, where you can briefly meet Chelsea and DeRay. So that'll be upstairs. Right.
Hi DeRay, kind of the pod. Chelsea, I have a question for you specifically.
Okay.
How do we deal with the entrenchment of like Facebook and Twitter? Like, besides, you know, shutting down all their servers, how do we find some sort of alternate infrastructure to use for organization, but without having the same sort of double-edged sword of giving away all our information? Thank you.
I have multiple answers to that, but some, you know, I think that a few of them are more for a backdoor, you know, like an outside conversation unfortunately. So I'll just stick to the main ones. people in technology in particular, the developers, I feel we have a role in this. And I know people that work at Facebook. I know people that work at Google. And we have to talk to these people and tell them we've got to do something. There's a lot of techniques and tools that we learned during the labor rights movement, in the 19th and early 20th century, like striking or push, go slows. There's a lot of tools and techniques and other ways in which we can, because people in technology, they get paid. It's not about wages. It's not about work conditions anymore. It's about the role and the ethical obligations that you have in that role, and we have ethical obligations as people in technology, and we should do things if we can, and work together if we can to stop these institutions from doing bad things. But the problem is that we talk more about results and getting more results and faster and better results, and it's this constant expectation of meeting deadlines and getting results, and that's a problem. And that's the biggest problem in this tech sector, is that the people who design and build this stuff don't think of the implications because they're only concerned about next week's results.
Thank you.
So Hopkins just created a position and hired for the vice president of security, and right now Hopkins doesn't have a campus police. Right now we use third-party security, and we have off-duty Baltimore City Police and sheriffs, and that's like the qualified candidates that they employ. They have the ability to carry, and they have the ability to arrest, but they don't necessarily do it on campus. But right now legislation has just passed saying that Hopkins is now going to be able to have their own police department.
It didn't pass.
Well, I'm sorry, they're investigating it and they're putting it in a trial, but it may pass. And the
Right.
university has decided that they wanted to support it. But for some of us who may not necessarily, or who have concerns that it may be similar to how the Baltimore City functions already, what advice can you give us? And maybe.
Yeah, don't bring cops on campus. Yeah, they don't belong in big schools. They don't belong in little schools. They don't belong in city schools. They don't belong in public schools. They don't belong in private schools. They don't belong in elementary schools. They don't belong in middle schools. Like, just get more than anything else, we need to not have police in schools at any level.
Thank you.
Hi, Chelsea. Thank you so much for coming here and
Hi.
for everything that you did for America and for the rest of the world, I guess. So my question is a fairly simple one. Actually, two questions. My first one would be, so as you said, there is a problem with, with the fact that America has an overwhelming military-industrial complex and that we have somewhat of an interventionist foreign policy. So how do you think, the citizens, and maybe how you personally, how do you think we're able to change the status quo, if we're able to change it at all? And my second question would be that I'm honestly quite amazed looking at you, because knowing, what you've been through, in prison and everything, how you were able to sort of maintain that inner strength, I guess, to sort of carry your sanity and your energy to this moment.
I mean, my friends just think I'm a badass, but I don't know about that. So yeah, on the status quo, like I don't think it's that we're not aware. I don't think it's an awareness issue. We are aware of the problems. Many of us know, and especially the like the problems that are happening in our communities and like how they fit within this bigger diaspora of problems. It's not an awareness issue. Like we all know that Facebook sucks. We all know that having these large militarized police forces are bad. But we expect some. The problem is that there's this expectation, I think, that somebody else is going to fix it. Somebody's going to come along and it'll all work out in the end. It's not going to happen. We're going to have to do stuff. We're going to have to We're going to have to organize. We're going to have to make these things not, we're going to have to make the bad things not happen because they're not going to sort themselves out. And I think that's the thing about the status quo is that it's not, people are comfortable with the status quo only because everybody still thinks it's going to work out in the end. And that's not how the world works,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So you touched a little bit on why you did what you did, and but you also mentioned that you're just a regular person who needs to
Wait,
pay
which
your
thing?
rent.
Because I've done a lot of things.
I think we take the main. Just I'm gonna release this classified document.
Okay, got it.
Basically
That
going
one.
to work with like the U.S.
That
government,
thing.
no big deal. But you also mentioned that you have to pay rent and cook, just the rest of us. And well, I did some Wikipedia search right there. And well, I mean, you were my age when you made that decision. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, obviously, also as a psych major, I don't know if it's reserved for a book or anything, but I was wondering, and I don't know how the process worked, if it was just like a click or if it was a lengthier process, but what were your inner, I don't know, thoughts or like psychological state right before when you decided, I'm going to take this step, and once I do it, like nothing is going to be the same?
So it's easy. It's simpler than that, thankfully. I can explain that fairly simple. It's more about when you're in a situation like that. It's more about, and you understand the consequences of. It's more about understanding the consequences of not doing something and understanding, will I regret not doing something? And if that weighed on me far more was me feeling like I know I can do something, and how will I feel if I don't? Well, how long will I regret that for? And that weighed on me far more than anything else. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
Sorry. I'm just going to read off my phone because I get nervous sometimes. So I
get nervous too.
I want to ask you about America's anti-war movement. So I was a kid for most of the Bush years, but from what I remember, there was, a relatively strong anti-war movement. Wasn't what it was in the 70s, and even during the early Obama years, there was that. And then we kind of pulled out of Iraq in 2011, and it seemed America lost like a lot of its sort of anti-war vigor. And even in 2016, 2012, the elections, most of the people running felt, fairly hawkish, both along the Democrats and Republicans. So I was wondering, well, one, why do you think, what do you think happened to the American anti-war movement? And two, what's it kind of going to need to get kicked back up again? Is it social media? Is it going to be more whistleblowers? Just like conscription, because that worked in like the Vietnam era, Is it what is it going to need to kick back into motion?
Yeah, I think it was a generational thing. A lot of people that were in the anti-war movement during Vietnam were still around, and still active by the time the Iraq War came in. So there was a knowledge base, experience. But I think it never really grew as much like engagement with like us. Our generation. It wasn't something that was significant in my life. I don't recall there being a whole lot, that happened that really made it front and center in my life until the surge in Iraq happened in 2006 and 2007. Whenever I saw it on TV all the time, that was sort of my first major engagement with the fact that, there's this thing that's happening. And I felt compelled to participate in that, because I didn't really know what falling apart, that Iraq was falling apart really meant, but I knew that I wanted that to not happen, so I wanted to do something, and I figured maybe I can do something about it while also dealing with being trans and a lot of other things. But I think that what's happening is that people feel, what makes people active and engaged is whenever you feel something and you see it right in front of you. I didn't really become active in that realm until I was in Iraq and actually there. Like, that was nothing never occurred, like doing something like like this thing never really occurred to me. So I didn't go in like as an anti-war person. I certainly didn't. I didn't go into Iraq as an anti-war person at all. So I think that what's happening is that people are experiencing the effects of the systems that we have domestically, and so there's a lot more engagement around around police and how they're fucking killing people, and how there's more around like the like crappy policies that we have for providing for communities and taking care of communities, and crime and immigration now, like with ICE, and like these issues are more domestic and they're more in front of us, so we're more engaged with those. So it's not that activism went away, it's just that it's more about the things that directly impact us. And so a lot of people were affected by Vietnam, like you pointed out, but now now we have generations of people who are affected by things that are happening because things are crumbling and falling apart after decades and centuries of these systemic problems not being addressed, instead only being emboldened. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. We will be having the reception upstairs, and hopefully you guys will have a chance to mingle. Thank you.
We did it.